For the past 2 days, I've been talking my husband's head off about this book, so I really need to make this video. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, Eclectic Reads. Today I would like to talk about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a different kind of book than I usually read. Although I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, mostly cozy mysteries, this is a book that has been on my radar for a long time. I don't usually read YA. Largely because I didn't have a very typical high school experience. Yes, I went to high school, but I didn't really have a social life in high school. I did a lot of out of school activities, but I was very, very sheltered. I probably went to a friend's house maybe twice a year. And so, for that reason, I usually can't relate to any of these books. It's like reading about aliens in outer space. I went to school with these people, and of course, my personality was very much like them. I'm not saying that I'm above any of these people, but I also know that my own experience in high school was different than a lot of my classmates. Anyway, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a thriller that one of my students, who is an early middle schooler, was reading, and she said that she loved it, and so I decided to pick it up. Do I think that this is appropriate for early middle schoolers? No. I think that the content is quite mature, but that's how I came across this book. And because it was actually really popular when it came out, I finally decided to purchase a copy. I was out of town last week, and so I read a lot of books. And one of the last days, I purchased this book and then read it on the long flight home. I read it in one day, and so I obviously enjoyed it. I raced through the book. I think that the pacing is very good. I think that some of the twists are really good. I also like the formatting. It is a mix of traditional prose as well as text messages and interviews. I also like that this is a cold case. As somebody with a research background, I really like when a mystery reopens a case, goes into the archives, pulls out interviews to figure out what really happened. So there was a lot that I liked about this book, but I had some issues, and I want to talk about that today. This video is divided up into two parts. The first part is spoiler free, and then I will have a spoilery section, which I will indicate both on screen as well as verbally. I ultimately gave this book 3 stars. The Good Girl's Guide to Murder follows a girl named Pip. She is a 17-year-old doing her senior capstone project, and she decides to reopen the case of the disappearance of Andy Bell, a very beautiful and popular high schooler who suddenly disappeared in 2014. Her disappearance was determined to have been a murder, even though they never found her body, and the disappearance was blamed on her boyfriend at the time, Sal Singh, an Indian American classmate and boyfriend. And his presumed guilt was solidified by the fact that he took his own life. He died by suicide. And so then the case was closed and was determined that he was the one who had killed Andy Bell and hid her body somewhere. But Pip, having known Sal, even though she's a few years younger than he was, believes that he was innocent. Now, in the beginning of the story, she is forced to sign a contract saying that she will not do anything unethical. Let me read you the supervisor's comment. Pippa, this is an incredibly sensitive topic as it concerns a terrible crime that happened in our own town. Your project has been accepted only on the condition that no ethical lines are crossed. Please find a more focused angle for your report as you work through your research. And there is to be no contact made with either of the families involved in this case. This will be considered an ethical violation, and your project will be disqualified. And Pippa had to sign saying, I certify that I have read and understood the regulations as set out in the notice to students. So she signed it. Okay? This is important because Pippa violates this statement. She does all the things that her supervisor told her not to do, and yet there are no repercussions. It's not a spoiler. Okay, I'm not spoiling anything. But at the end of the story, after she figures out who committed this crime, She gets to present her research to the entire school. There is never repercussion for all of the various things she does that, as I will describe, really does break this statement. So already I'm like, there's an issue here. Pippa goes to Sal's brother, Ravi. Ravi and his family have been shunned by the community because of Sal's presumed crime. Pippa tells Ravi, I know that your brother is innocent and I want to prove it. And Ravi soon ends up joining up with Pip and they work together to figure out what happened in 2014. At the heart of the story is a house party. These house parties were wild and extravagant. They were called catastrophes. There's drugs, alcohol, and Sal attended one of these house parties. According to his statement, he had left the house party at 12:15 a.m. to make his 1 a.m. curfew. However, a few days later, his friends contradicted his alibi, saying that he actually left the party at 10:30 p.m. And that is the time that Andie Bell had left her house. So it's believed that Sal had intercepted Andie's car, killed her, transported her body in her car, and then dumped her car somewhere. And because he ended up taking his own life, it seemed like, okay, he's guilty, case closed. This is a book that has a lot of content. I want to warn you about that. We have drugs. We have grave, you know what I'm talking about, sexual violence involving drugs as well. There's a dog that's killed, not on page, but he is killed, and his family mourns his death. So I know that there's, quite a lot in there. I know that for some people, the death of a dog is a deal breaker. Pippa, as I said, does a lot of things that are very dangerous and illegal to get her information. Everything from pretending to be somebody else and texting under a different name to friends of Andie and Sal, breaking into houses. She observes criminal activity, and that puts her at serious risk. And in the end, she actually comes knocking at the killer's door, like, hi, you're the killer, and goes into their house. She calls 911, telling them, hey, this person is blah, 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 right? All this information. The operator says, don't go into the house. She's like, I'm going into the house. The operator's like, no, don't go into the house. And she does. I know that 17-year-olds are impulsive, but this is crazy. She does a lot of things that put her in harm's way, put other people in harm's way. If she had found all this information, she should have directed it to the police. Now, I also understand that it's more complex than that, but I read a lot of cozy mysteries. So yes, there is a certain level of suspension of disbelief required to read these books with amateur sleuths that do things that would never fly in the real world. But even this was over the top. Also, there is a crime that we learn about in the story, and Pip helps conceal it. So that also raises questions about her integrity. Here she is wanting to bring justice to Andie and Sal, but then when it comes to this other crime, she's willing to conceal it. So ultimately, like I said, I gave this book 3 stars. It's not a series that I think I will continue reading. However, I am interested in reading another book by the same author. I think it's called The Disappearance of Rachel Price. I will put it on the screen. I have read another YA thriller before that I gave 5 stars, and that was Promise Boys. That is a thriller that follows a school for at-risk teens who are predominantly Black and Latino brown. In this story, a principal is murdered and one of the Black students is accused of the crime, and a group of 4 boys work to try to figure out who did it. It is a book that really exposes the kinds of schools that often make the headlines, the schools for troubled teens that are turn around these kids' lives, And I thought that was an excellent book. So if you're interested in a YA thriller that is, in my opinion, fantastic, I would recommend Promise Boys. Now for the spoilery section. If any of this interests you, even though I had issues with it, if you want a fast-paced thriller and you're willing to suspend disbelief, click away. Okay, here is the thing that happens. So Naomi, who is Pip's friend Kara's sister, older sister, she was part of the circle with Max, our serial criminal and grabist, and of course Sal. He was also at the party. One day, Max and Naomi and a bunch of other people were in a car. Max was completely wasted. He was drunk. He was high. He drove his car and got in an accident. And the driver of that other car got severely disabled. He became a paraplegic. It was a hit and run. They ran away, and that secret was kept from law enforcement. The only person who seems to know is Mr. Ward, Naomi's father, who, of course, is a grabist himself, as we learn. And nothing ever comes of that case. That driver never gets any justice. Pip agrees to conceal that information from the police. So when Max is eventually arrested for a bunch of other crimes, he is never held responsible for having caused severe harm upending the life of this driver. And I'm like, and Naomi, she also, along with Max and the others of the party, they gave a false alibi, which also led to the death of Sal. So Naomi's like her father, like daughter, and Pip enables it. That just infuriated me. You just introduced this disabled character you don't even know about, and you're just like, oh, this guy, he got disabled, severely disabled by this car accident. And because the person who was somewhat involved is Naomi, who is Kara's sister, Pip is like, okay, fine, I won't say anything. What? Like, how is that okay? Also, I've talked about the fact that my high school experience was not like my classmates. I went to a predominantly white school, and, I've always struggled to read books about high schools in the US because, like I said, I had a very sheltered upbringing. That being said, it is rare for Asian American parents to let their kids go on sleepovers, let alone a house party with a curfew of 1 a.m. I found the Indian American representation in this book to be very poor, really non existent in my view. It's not enough to just have a character named Sal he's at a house party. Also, it was weird too to see how encouraging Pip's parents were about her going to a house party. She goes undercover at one of these catastrophe parties, and her father tells her, try for once to do something at least a bit illegal. I'm like, the parent is encouraging the daughter to do something illegal at a party that involves alcohol and drugs. White American parents can't be like this. Please tell me this is rare, because that is just a lot. And yeah, Pip just makes such dangerous decisions. She does one thing after the other that just puts her life at risk. And she's never held accountable for it, even though she signed a statement saying that she wouldn't do anything unethical. She would not talk to any of the family members of those involved. She does, and more, and gets to be celebrated at the very end for that. I did predict that the older man was Mr. Ward from the very beginning, largely because I'm a teacher and I know that we have access to a lot of private information of our students that, in the hands of the wrong person, like Mr. Ward, could be used. So I felt like there was just such intimate information that this older man knew that he had to be a teacher or somebody who would have access to that information, addresses, for instance. I wish that the girl that was in his house was Andy. I understand why Becca killed Andy. It makes a lot of sense. She was grabed by Max, and Andy was also selling those drugs, and she laughed it off as not serious. And so I understand what would lead to her death, but I also wish that she was still alive at least. Then we could have found her. Anyway, there were a lot of things in this book that made me not love it, even though I raced through it. If you read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, let me know what your thoughts are. Were there things that you felt were I didn't talk about that you want to mention in the comments? Please don't include any spoilers, of course. Does the series get better? At the moment, I'm not thinking I'm going to continue with the series, but if it does get better, I might consider picking it up. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.